Hi, good morning all. In today's session, we talk about Spring Boot H2 database. Okay, H2 is the database. Okay, we'll see in details. In today's session, we cover about the storage type, what are the storage type and which storage type H2 have, why we are selecting H2, how to configure H2 in your application, how to access the H2 database, and just one simple example means how you can access this H2 database. These are the content we cover into today's session. Before start our session, there is one most frequently asked question in interviews. So most of the interviewer ask how the data is actually stored in a memory, like in a hard drive, SSD, or in a RAM. How data is stored on databases on a memory. At end of the session, you will get answer of this question, and I elaborate more on that. Okay. Just move ahead with the R session. So H2 is a in-memory database. Okay. There are two type of databases. One is the in-memory database, and another type is the means hard drive storage database, where this example like H2 is the one database, another is the Derby is example that provided by Apache, another HSQL database is there, and this is like hard disk like storage database, which is you can consider MySQL, Oracle, MS SQL. All these type of databases are the hard drive databases. You can consider this is the standalone servers. Most of the time means the in-memory database used to do the POCs and check application is running or not. That's the basic thing when we use the database. Okay, so why we choose the H2 database? So there are multiple factors because, okay, so first of all we said that in memory database we choose to run the POCs or run the small code or just to test it's working or not. That's why we choose in memory database. So H2 came with the embedded with the Spring Boot database. Okay, this is a open source. And it's widely available support into that. This is the one reason. H2 is an in-memory database, so it's very fast to access this database. Zero compression required in a Spring Boot application. All the we just define some compression in a later section. There is a compression part where we discuss about the compression, but very minimum compression required to H2 database with compared to other in-memory options. Okay, apart from that, okay, this is your application. Okay, suppose this is your application, and currently this is accessing your H2 database. Okay, and if you want to choose another database like on a production ready environment, suppose we are using MySQL as a database, so it's very easy to cut this rope and start this flow, or cut this and start this flow. So that's why we are pull this H2 as an in-memory database. It's easy to use and easy to switch from any database to other database. Apart from that, lightweight and faster execution. You can get to know why I am saying lightweight in a later part. But yeah, it's very lighter and it's very fast to use. Apart from that, normally everyone have idea about the SQL, like structured query language. If you want to parse that data or filter some kind of data, that we are generally doing with the SQLs and using the JDBC template. So on H2 database, simply you can use the same code. No code changes is required, just need to database connection and all the steps are required. It's through the application also it's supported, and through the web console it's also supported. Means this database you can access through your Java Spring Boot application, and side by side you can on a Chrome you can just open this, and here also you can access the database. So there are multiple ways to access this database. Okay, that's why we choose to discuss H2 here. Okay, in the next part session we talk about the how actually H2 databases are configured. Okay, so here suppose first we check about the configuration. So everything if you want to add into your Spring Boot application, first you need to add the entry of pom.xml. Generally pom.xml, go and download the libraries for you. Okay, go and download the libraries for you from Maven. Okay, whatever plugin you are using, but through the Maven that library get downloaded. So here we are saying that com.h2 databases we require this library, and this is the runtime library. It means we can specify that scope of that. So for us this library get downloaded. This is the just basic compression, means for the library purpose, but we like application. So the download is a part done, but how to use that in our application? Okay, for that you want to do certain properties, or add certain properties into your application property. Application property is a file where you are mentioning all the config things, like what is your application name, on which application port your application is running, all that stuffs. So on that these are the default properties came. If you are using MySQL, you are using the same properties, only value get changed. So for us H2 this is the database, like testdb is the name, rest of the things like JDBC, H2 is the database, in memory this is the database. This is the by definition, you can easy to get that. Apart from driver name, which driver you are using, username is by default SA, password is a blank, and this is a dialect class, S2 dialect class you are using. If you want to use the MySQL as a connection or a MySQL as a database for your app, then simply you just need to change this, whatever I am underlined, like URL you need to change ddbc./MySQL property. Here driver class is required. You can define the same username and password for your application, and this dialect class is required. Means 1, 2 and 3, these are the property is mandatory to change. Username and password you can put as is, the same as is. Okay, next part came into picture, like files of that. So means resources for your H2 database. Like this is an in-memory database, means whenever your application is at a start of your application, that DB is created. Whatever operation you are doing from request and put and down, all the data stored into database here. And when you down call stop your application, that time this is a start of application and this is a stop. You the instance get deleted. Okay, instance get deleted. That means this is a 100% temporary data. You cannot access the data when your application gets stopped. Okay, that's why these are the two files are required for us when we are saying in memory database. In a schema.sql, these both file under the resources folder. Okay, in this folder we are putting the DDL, means create table and all the things which are required when you start your application. By default, table creation, index creation, views creation, all data we will put into schema.sql, and all the DML thing or the data manipulation language queries we are putting into data.sql. All the inserts command and update command you are putting into this. Like in a schema.sql, all the create table, and in a data SQL, all the insert command should be there. So when your application gets started, your application is ready to show certain use cases or at least some basic data is there. That's why these two files came into picture, and this is very useful tool, or I can say useful. These two files you can basically configure your base data for your application. Okay, till now we covered about H2 database and basic configuration, how to configure. But okay, you did the configuration and you start your application, and how and you store the data through using the API, but you want to actually see the data, like similar like MySQL. Can't you, if you want to see the data, is there any way to HTTP database? Yes, there is a way. You can access that data through the web console. Okay, so yeah, for web console, by default this web console is up, so you need to define one property, Spring H2 console enable as a true. If you set true, then you can easy to access your application, like localhost 8080 H2 console. If you hit this URL, here also I highlighted that, if you hit this kind of console, you will get by default. We already configured that username and password here, means similar as application property we mentioned here. So same password or username we need to add here, and just hit the connect. Afterward, you will get to see this screen, and when you say like select star any data after the insertion, if you run kind of your select star from any table, you will get this data. Okay, this is a one way to see that data on a console. But yeah, how to store the data into database. So already we discussed about in a Spring Boot auto configuration and Spring Boot examples. I just recap over it. So when initially at the start of application, we go on Spring Initializer, we select that the project name, language and a Spring Boot version. After that we select the libraries, like Spring Web is required for application, Spring Data JPA required, and H2 database properties required. These are the implicitly by default when you say generate, all these entries like whatever web and JPA and H2 database required, all that entries are added into pom.xml. Okay, and when you start your application, all the libraries get downloaded into your system, because all the entries already added into your pom.xml, and when you generate that project get downloaded. Once you download your application, few things you just add that into your workspace. Earlier also I said that your request, when you hit the any API from Postman, that request came over the controller. In a controller you are writing some services over it. Controller services get called, services call your business logic or the implementation, service implementation, and these are directly connected with your DAO layer, or I can say DAO or repository, and repository are converting to entity, and entity stored into database. Okay, this is the flow. I just cover the basic about how the entity look like. So you should define that public class student is a my entity, and over entity and table, two things are required to add. So student and similar column, whatever you added into database, you just need to here under @column, and this entity get created. Okay, entity is created and it's directly mapped with the database. Afterward, you need to define some student.repository, and here you need to pass your student class, whatever we are mentioning @table. Okay, and when you want to save, you just need to do this repository object of student repository repo. This is the student repository object which is created by Spring, and we are using through auto-wire annotation. So when we say student repository dot save and we pass this student object like student1, this is automatically get stored into in your H2 database. And if you hit here select star from student, you will get to know these row only 123 Amit at the Gmail and Amit. Okay. Yeah, that's the basic about the H2 database. We came at a main part, like earlier I said that we'll cover at the end of thing how DB data is stored into in a hard drive or in a RAM thing. So most of the people try to answer this question, but they are wrongly directed, because as per our information we know that data is stored into table, and table is a tabular format. Okay, tabular format. So as per the basic thing, we are saying that the data is stored into table, and all the tables are stored on a HHD or hard drive. Okay, all the data stored into HHD or SSD. Okay, these things. Okay, but this is not true, because that table is written on a hard drive in a file format, and all the data read by MySQL or any database client from the file. Okay, because MySQL or H2, these are the applications, and these are the special kind of application, and these files are also special kind of files which are used by these servers and read that data and store data into that file. For OS, everything is a file, nothing like as a table or a CSV or any kind of. These are all the extension for storing the data. So all the data stored into file are accessible by this application, and these are the special kind of file structure, you can say. Okay, yeah, that's the answer of this kind of question. If you like this format, like content and then question, and at the end of our session we discuss about the answer of that question. Yeah, let me know if you like that. Yeah, also let me know what are you want sessions around the Spring Boot and MySQL and Java. Yeah, thanks all, bye.